Hello and good evening, all you wonderful YouTubers out there. So tonight we are going to be looking at a game called Neverwinter, as my character screen here implies. More specifically though, we are actually going to look at a class here called the Hunter Ranger. Now before I get into this, yes, this is my first video for Neverwinter, having done XCOM and Warframe previously. Now, a little bit about Neverwinter as a game. If you've played games like World of Warcraft, even Diablo, EverQuest, pretty much any of the mainstream type MMO or multiplayer games, you will have some familiarity with how this game plays. It's a little bit more Twitch-based, so probably more in line with things like Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2. Now, Neverwinter is obviously a Dungeons & Dragons licensed product. Now, as such, a lot of the content in here will be familiar to people who have played Dungeons & Dragons before. Now, often only in name, not necessarily in function. So, just sit on that one for a moment. Why this is important is I play a Hunter Ranger. That class does not actually necessarily exist in Dungeons & Dragons. You can create it, but it doesn't actually exist per se. It's like Great Weapon Fighter, same deal. That's just a fighter using a two-handed weapon. But, having said that, they did a really good job of some of the classes. Case in point, Hunter Ranger. As Rangers are known for using bows and being ambidextrous with two-handed weapon fighting, so are the Rangers in Neverwinter. And in fact, to perform at your best, you need to stance. So you need to go between being a ranged combatant and a melee combatant fairly rapidly and fairly often. And this build that I'm using is a slight modification to one that I found on MMOminds.com, put together by a person who goes by the name of Sylvanus Windrunner. So if you ever see this video, thank you. I will have a link to that build in my description. But anyways, here we go. So I will show you what I have for power selections and whatnot. I am not max level and I do not have a lot of the high-end gear, so bear in mind this is basically a leveling build from level 60 onwards. So this is what I have, this is what I'm packing. Oh yes, and my minion there is a tank to help keep things as far away from me as possible when I need it. It's actually quite necessary for this to work properly. So, here's my character. At a glance, not too shabby, 25 dexterity, 23 wisdom. Now, I'm not boosting up strength even though I will be using melee. The reason why is actually because a lot of my damage comes from dexterity. See damage bonus. And wisdom, with my critical bonus of a base plus 13% with a 23 wisdom. Now, stats do have a role in this game. They're not as huge as you might think right off the bat, but at the end of the game, it can make up for not having all the right enchantments, not necessarily having all the right gear available to you at the time, so it is good to build out your character relatively heavily towards certain stats. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I mean, obviously we've got the breakdowns of things like AoE resistance, movement speeds, like critical chance, which is 38.4%. How much of my enemy armor am I ignoring? At end game, you want this at about 60%. Right now, I'm leveling up. Who cares? Although you do notice a bit of a difference. I'm not going to lie there. The important thing, lifesteal. As a very squishy character with no ability to heal whatsoever, this is actually very important. So health regeneration and lifesteal. So health regeneration regenerates your health out of combat. If you are in combat, it doesn't kick in. If you're out of combat, it does. If you do not put any of this stat into anything. You will not get this bonus, period. Lifesteal chance, well, as the name implies, I have a 4% chance of stealing health equivalent to 100% of the damage I do. It's actually kind of handy, especially when you're hitting guys for like 10,000 points of damage. So, definitely something you want to go for in this game. And powers. When you're building your character, you will have to spend unnecessary points on powers, because certain tiers of powers unlock at a certain number of points spent, as you can see here, and a certain character level. So that's 5 points, that's 10 points, and on and on and on and on and on, as you can see, all the way down to the bottom, 70 points, and level 70. So, what have I picked and why? Well, let's start with what we call the at-will powers, or what are pretty much your basic left and right click attacks. Rapid shot. This should pretty much be self-explanatory at this point in time. You can see a rough breakdown of its abilities, and if I switch to my melee, you can see what it does for melee as well too. Then we go to my other one, which is Hunter's Teamwork. Now this is actually more your bread and butter ability. The importance of this skill is that it will actually give you a healing bonus once you kill an enemy, and that can go a long way. So you pretty much mark an enemy with your ranged ability, and you kill that enemy, he'll drop resources, which will either restore action points, stamina, or hit points, well, technically all three of them, to everyone who picks it up. And you can only have one guy marked at a time, so you can't literally go into an entire group and go, hey, there's 5 guys there, and mark all 5. It's, you mark one, you kill that one, and then you mark the next one if there's still anyone left standing, and rinse and repeat. The melee is kind of an interesting one. Careful attack actually does additional damage to your enemies in the form of additional attacks, but only with melee attacks, from what I've been able to find. I don't really use it that much, I'm not gonna lie. So, if anyone else out there knows more about it, by all means say something. So, those are the 2 at-wills that I tend to use. I tend to use Hunter's Teamwork as Hunter's Teamwork, and I tend to use Rapid Shot as Rapid Shot. I don't really use Rapid Strike, but I will. Now, as for my encounter powers, now these are the ones that have a cooldown, usually anywhere in that realm of 5 to 12 seconds apiece. The first one is Hindering Shot, which is actually this one right here. Shoot a bunch of arrows at a guy's knees, entangle them, make them move slower, or make them not move at all. It's useful. Melee version, pretty much the same deal. Now, most of this build is based around Grasping Roots, and I will get into why later. So the next thing is Constricting Arrow. Same thing, Grasping Roots, but these are stronger and it will hit everything around your first target. So if you've got 5 guys clustered together and you shoot one of those arrows in, it will Grasping Roots all 5 of the guys, which is handy. So it also means that they're not really going to be able to advance on you anytime soon. Steel Breeze doesn't do much except for increase your stamina, so if you're dodging a lot, it's handy to have, but it's also got a really good AoE range, which is the reason why I have it, but primarily I use it for Constricting Arrow. You cannot switch out your melee power to be different than your ranged power. So it's a little bit of a sacrifice one way or the other. Now, the other power that I have sitting in here is Fox's Cunning and Fox Shift. Now, these are actually really awesome. Now, Fox's Cunning is handy because you will automatically dodge the next attack that comes your way. So already right there makes it worth using. Doesn't do damage, but it's handy. Start out with that because you want to dodge the first attack that comes your way right after you attack something. The other reason I use it is for Fox Shift. And it's a channeled attack. It will hit pretty much everything in an area twice, so it can actually do quite a bit of damage. And it also gives you a nice run speed boost, so you get in there, hit everything, and get out quickly. With a okay lifesteal chance, you actually will also get usually some lifesteal off that, which is handy. Now, the reason why you want to use Grasping Roots, or anything that has like a Constricting Vine type power, is Aspect of the Serpent. No, sorry, that was a feat. My bad. Let's get into my class features, and then I'll get into the feats. This is actually kind of what makes stance dancing really useful. For every attack you make in your ranged stance, you buff up your next series of melee attacks, and increases the number, I think, up to 3 attacks are boosted by, like, I think right now I've got it at 16% extra damage. It's not bad for the next 3 attacks. Then, when you switch stances and go into melee, it does the same thing for your next series of ranged attacks. So this is why once you get going with this build, you can actually put out a lot of damage very quickly, is this. The other ability I have going right now is Cruel Recovery. It's handy because for a few seconds, in this case I've got grand total of 12 seconds, every time I land a critical hit, I get 1% of my hit points as an extra health bar on top, so that has to get depleted first. And with a decent critical strike rate, it creates a nice little health buffer, because hunters are squishy. That's just all there is to it. You will get killed if you're not careful very quickly. Now on to feats. Since this is primarily a critical strike and health steal build, I will be going with lifesteal in critical strike. No, I haven't taken this feat yet, but once I max out what I've got down here, that will be the next one I take all 5 points of. However, where was it? Yes. Deft strikes. Deft strikes increases the damage output of your next melee or ranged power that deals damage by the given amount there. As you can see, I've got, at max rank, it's an extra 10% power on top of what that other talent does. So this is actually the other reason why you want to switch between stances. The other thing you want to do is, what was this one? Yes. So, this is the other reason. Grasping Roots is very important. Forest Bond, every time you apply Grasping Roots, it reduces your recharge, the recharge time on your powers by up to 5% every time. So, again, you can just keep the ball rolling as long as you keep switching between stances, keep applying Grasping Roots to stuff, so... and then this lets your Grasping Roots last longer, which will play into another feat I take later. Swiftness of the Fox. Melee encounter powers shorten the cooldown of your ranged powers. Again, more stance dancing. So as you start using your powers, you will reduce cooldowns of all the other powers. Very handy. Serpent's Bite. Aspect of the Serpent now provides more damage per stack. They also increase your critical chance per stack. So this is actually where your critical strike chance comes from. So if you manage to get, was it 3 stacks or 5 stacks max on the Aspect of the Serpent? We'll say 5. So 5 times 2.5%. That's what you get for your additional bonus to critical strike. So my critical strike will go from 34% to 46%. So, and then of course, I also get an extra 5% damage bonus on top of the already existing 12%. So, that's nice. Then there's this, Biting Snares. When you apply Grasping Roots or Thorned Roots, you gain Biting Snares. Biting Snares causes your next stance shift to grant Master Trapper, which regenerates 20% of my action or ability points, increases my damage by 30%, and increases your control durations by 60% for 10 seconds. So it also causes Grasping Roots that are already in effect to last longer, increases the damage output that I'm going to deal for the next 10 seconds by another 30% on top of all the other damage boosts I'm getting. It's kind of a disgusting ability. It's very handy though. That all plays into this. Thorn Roots. This is why this build can do as much damage as it does. I don't have this maxed out. I've got 2 more rings to do. As it stands right now, my Grasping Roots, my Strong Grasping Roots, are upgraded to Thorned Roots. And Thorned Roots right now will deal 120% of my weapon damage every second. 250% of my weapon damage will always be dealt immediately to any enemy that cannot be controlled. So anyone that you can't lock down, no crowd control, so anyone that you would otherwise normally be able to keep in place that can't be kept in place, they automatically take an extra 250% weapon damage right there. So this is why this build can just tear guys apart really quickly, is you're doing so much damage immediately and so much damage over time. So that's in a nutshell why I have this built out the way I do. Now I'm going to go back to my powers real quick, kind of give you another look at Hindering Strike and Hindering Shot. Hindering Shot does not apply Strong Grasping Roots. It applies weak Grasping Roots. Hindering Strike applies Strong Grasping Roots. And it hits everything in an AoE around you. That is why I have this ability. Because when I'm in my ranged stance, it's my Constricting Arrow that applies Strong Grasping Roots. When I'm in my melee stance, it is my Hindering Strike which applies Strong Grasping Roots to take advantage of all that extra damage over time. And the two really do synergize well with each other, especially with the way that I have this build set up. So now that I've been blabbing my mouth off about this, I'll show you how this actually works, how this plays out. I just need to find a group of guys that I can, you know, maul. These guys will do nicely. And I did not take any damage. So that's kind of what you can expect from this particular setup. Just gonna wait for this. There's one more guy here. I'm gonna wait for him to show up. Let's do it this way. Took a little bit of damage there, but not like fighting with my Great Weapon Fighter. My Great Weapon Fighter takes a lot of damage for some reason. But anyways, so that was dealing with a large group with an otherwise very easy to kill character. So that is the Hunter Ranger in action in leveling up. As I mentioned before, I'm only level 63, max level is 70. I do not have a ton of really awesome and amazing gear, but I do have some. So when I'm max level, it'll probably make a huge difference. Right now, not so much. Anyways, that is all for tonight. I hope you enjoy, and if you do ever get the opportunity to play this game, I definitely recommend it. If for nothing else, it's got a fantastic story. Other than that, I'll catch you all later.